G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Dr. Simon Schillebeeckx from Handprint. He's based in Singapore. Thanks for your time today, Simon.
Hey Troy, very happy to be there.
Let's start with how we know each other. Kitcast to help people like yourself find good podcasts to go on, and we get a monthly email from them with all the new guests they're working with. And I saw your name on the list, had a look at what you do, and I thought it would be interesting for our audience. So I reached out on LinkedIn, and here we are.
Absolutely. Let's get started.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So the company is called Handprint. We're kind of the opposite of Footprint, right? Footprint is all the bad shit companies do in order to destroy the planet. Handprint is all the good stuff companies and people can do in order to save the planet. And so what we are doing is we've created a digital marketplace for the most impactful nonprofit organizations in the world. We digitize their service offering and then make that accessible to companies. So companies come on our platform to create a positive impact in the world. They can just buy trees or corals or ocean plastic cleanup or hours of education on the marketplace, but they can also integrate micro contributions to these projects into their interactions with customers and employees. And that is really where a lot of the value comes from. And so the way we make money is we earn a commission on the money we raise for impact partners. So we work as a commercial agent for them. And then corporates subscribe to our technology set for a monthly fee. So it's like a SaaS.
And how did you start out?
So my background is in sustainability consulting and academia. I moved to Singapore in 2015 to join Singapore Management University as a professor and started doing research or continued my research really on innovation in the natural world. And then ended up going to Myanmar together with a guy that I hired out of USC in the US to do research on a non-profit organization that was doing really, really cool stuff around reforestation. They were planting trees with drones. They had just, back in 2018, when this was still possible and popular, they just done a $1 million ICO for trees. And they were just incredible. And so we spent a good week there doing research, spending time in the forest, planting mangroves, learning a lot about the mangroves, and got really inspired by the story of the 78-year-old Norwegian man who decided to spend his golden years in Myanmar. So we came back to Singapore and decided to set up a nonprofit called Global Mangrove Trust that was going to help this organization. Now, that got quickly on the hand. We got commissioned by the UN to write a report on sustainable digital finance. Had a couple of interesting findings from that report, and then started working with a long-term friend of mine, Matthias, at the end of 2019 on a big grant proposal for Global Mangrove Trust. Now, that grant proposal didn't go anywhere, but the collaboration between Matthias, Ryan, and I went very well. And Matthias convinced us to move part of the technology we've been developing within the NGO into a new enterprise, and that became Handprint.
And so what year did Handprint start? Was that 2020?
Yeah, so I think officially we took over a company that Matthias already had at the end of 2019, and we hired our first person in June 2020. So we were in the middle of a pretty diligent lockdown in Singapore. So we had a lot of time on our hands because we couldn't do anything, but we were also unable to meet any potential customers. So it was an interesting time to start a company.
Yeah, sounds like it. And how old were you when you started the business about 5 years ago?
Yeah, it's about 4.5 years ago. So I'm 40 now, so I was probably 35 or 36.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over those 4.5 years?
It's been a mixed bag. So we grew very slowly in the beginning. In the first year, very little revenue, then started going up a little bit, and now we're around 200,000 US per year. Now, what's relevant to recognizing that number is that the revenue that we record, because we work as an agency, is only the revenue that is basically coming from the commission. So that $200,000 reflects about 5-6x more impact, maybe 10x more impact. And we've only pivoted towards this SaaS model that I described in the beginning, really at the end of last year. So initially we purely functioned as a marketplace. So there's a lot of forecasted growth in the next couple of months with a couple of big contracts coming. And our goal is to be revenue positive by the end of Q2.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think you said before we hit record, you also get a bit of sponsorship. Is that right?
We've gotten some grants from mainly small accelerators that we joined, but at the moment it's still quite limited. If anyone's listening and wants to give us a big grant, very happy to talk about that.
Yep. And number of full-time equivalent team members you started with, and where are you at now?
So we started with the 3 founders. The first hire we did was a tech person. So our CEO has decent tech and development capabilities, but he's not really a developer. So we grew our company, I think, in 2022 and early 23. The highest number we had was 44. We went down again to 16 now. So shrunk quite a bit. Part of that was because we delivered a big piece of technology, which allowed us to kind of reduce headcount. Part of that is just the market has been quite difficult. The current global situation isn't really that favorable towards climate and nature, despite all of the attention in the media. But yeah, as capital dries up and companies become more risk averse, it's been a quite tricky period. But there's sunshine after the rain. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So I think we're almost at the end of the negative period, and the next couple of months are looking very promising.
Right. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I'll let you know when it happens.
I've got to change.
I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah.
I think maybe by the end of this quarter, we should feel like, okay, now we're really on the right track. But I had more moments that I felt like, oh, this might work than real success.
Welcome to business.
Yeah.
What does success look like to you?
So as a company, we've got probably quite unusual ambitions. So the 2 metrics that we really track, one is very common, which would be MRR. Now that we're moving to the SaaS model, so that's obviously key. The second key metric that we really track and communicate with the team on a weekly basis is the number of square meters of ecosystem restored. So a lot of the impact work that we do is in nature. And as a consequence, we can quantify the total impact we've had with all of our clients together. So we've just crossed 3 million square meters, I think, in January. And if everything goes well, we should get to 7 or 8 by the end of the year.
Fantastic. That is great. Well done. And for the audience, MRR is monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
As a founder, the main thing to really focus on is probably develop your own audience on LinkedIn. I think we've gotten a lot of traction and a lot of good conversations coming in from organic growth on our LinkedIn profile. At some point, I think at the end of 2022, Matthias and I, so that Matthias is the CEO, we posted a nature tech ecosystem. So an overview of all of the companies that we could identify that were working in this space that we are, like on the intersection of digital technology and nature. And we got within 2 weeks over 1.4 million hits on that. I think collectively we added 14,000 people to our LinkedIn accounts that saw that and wanted to start talking to us. And so that created a lot of buzz. And we've been trying to replicate that success ever since without that much success. But what does happen is that, your average engagement per post is going up significantly once you have a success like that. So I think this is probably one of the best things to do.
How did you fund the business?
Initially, we obviously didn't have funding. So the first person we hired, I paid out of pocket for about 5-6 months. And then we started to discuss with a lot of our friends, or we'd already been discussing with lots of our friends in terms of whether they wanted to invest in our company. And being based in Singapore, where you have lots of expats that are all doing reasonably well in life, we were pretty successful in just raising a friends and family round. So we set up an SPV, a special purpose vehicle called Friends of Handprint, where we aggregated all of these small investments. And then, so raised about, maybe in total like $670,000 like that. So that was quite substantial. And then we got into an accelerator here at one of the universities. And during that entrance interview, I met with the CEO of Tunes, which is a fintech company focusing on providing alternative railways for international money transfers. And that person absolutely loved what I had to say. And after my 6-minute pitch said, I'm going to invest. And after 5 months of arduous and painful negotiations and writing a contract, they invested. And then we just grew from there. We got another round of investment from Singtel Innovate, the venture capital arm of Singtel, the telco company that owns Octus, I think, in Australia. And currently, we are in the process of doing a US crowd equity fundraise on WeFunder.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
I think I would. I think I would do this again, but I'd probably definitely would do it quite differently. I think, like everyone that starts a company for the first time, I think you make a lot of mistakes. There are things to avoid that we did too soon. Part of that was, I think, because we were stuck in COVID. And so a lot of the user research and the personal relationship building that you need to do in the beginning of a company to really get clear commitment and ideally sign LOIs, we didn't get to do, or it was very hard. So we probably over-engineered in the beginning. And the other thing that I think we made a mistake at is that the company really was inspired by the findings from our reports that we did for the United Nations, where we identified that the 2 main reasons why companies underinvest in nature are the complexity of identifying the right recipients. So if companies are doing donations or they want to support nature, like, who are they giving this money to? And companies, of course, don't have any practice in that. It's not their core business. So this was a key thing. And then the second part was the question, like, why would a company do this? So how does a company capture value from doing this? And so Handprint really was built to solve those 2 problems, which are, at a global scale, massive and important problems, because we need to invest over $8 trillion in the next 30 years in nature in order to protect biodiversity and fight climate change. And so we thought we had a very clear product market fit because we had this very clear vision. But the reality is that we've learned the hard way that most companies don't care about this problem. They simply don't want to solve this. And I think what we overestimated was that the findings of a piece of semi-academic research were really going to translate very clearly to what companies actually wanted. And turns out that we were probably 5 years early, 10 years early in Asia, and 3 or 4 years early in Europe and Australia. And so now time is finally catching up with us. And so we see now that in Europe and Australia, traction is changing a lot, and more, even of our competitors are adopting our approach to solving these challenges. So that's good to see.
Yeah. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Oh, how much time do you have to talk about stressful points?
Yeah.
I think the most stressful real single point in our growth was really when we had to make this really tough decision to let go a big part of the team in order to extend our runway. And we spent quite a lot of time planning it with the founders and our CEO. But yeah, going through that meeting, which was on Friday, and then afterwards having all of the follow-up conversations, which thank God I didn't have to do, but our CEO did. That was really, really tough. And I think I remember speaking to Matthias afterwards, and he said, like, this must have been horrible for everyone affected. It's also really shit for everyone who stays in the company because they lose friends. But he said, I've never felt worse in my life. And so and I think it's often, as a founder, you need to make these really hard decisions that are really painful. But yeah, you just need to sometimes cut off an arm and a leg in order for the organism to survive. And we've had to do this once, and I hope we'll never have to do it again.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
So I think for me, the area that I had to work on most was really letting go and trusting that the team would be able to do stuff independently, and perhaps not as fast as I could do this, but focusing more on where I can add most value and trusting and outsourcing the rest of the tasks is really anathema to being an academic. Academics typically sit in their ivory tower doing research, don't talk to anyone. And if they ever collaborate, which obviously happens, they typically work with people that are very similar in terms of training and in terms of mindset. And when you start a company, I've learned that you start working with people with very different skill sets, and you need to acknowledge that this is just shit I don't know. But letting go in that way, I think, has been the most important thing for me to learn.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Well, I don't know. We're not really growing that fast yet. But the key challenge, I think, in managing fast growth is to know when fast growth is going to start. Because in many ways, like every company that builds a platform or builds a digital solution or any other solution that could scale wants to plan for scale. And if you're strategic about this, you don't just build non-scalable processes. So you're over-engineering and you're over-complexifying things before you grow. And then once you start growing, you hope you can reap the benefits from that. Now, one of our advisors, who is the CEO of a large tech company in France, told us, like, you don't need to do this because whatever processes and automations you build when you're 20 people or 40 people, they're probably not going to work anyway when you're doing 50 people. So the key challenge, I think, is really on figuring out, like, at what moment are we going to expect, or is this growth coming? How do we build a team that has this capacity to manage this? And then once it starts, which for us is going to be at the end of the month when we sign our biggest contract yet, is okay, now we got to see that we can actually do this. So I'll hope to have a better answer on this once we've been growing fast for a couple of months. But for me, it's the inflection point. Knowing when the inflection point is there, that's the critical thing.
But surely you have had fast growth. It may not be reflected yet on the top line, but you've went from 3 to, a peak of 44 within a few years. That is phenomenal growth.
Yeah, in terms of growing the team, we've done this quite rapidly at some point, and then of course we've decelerated that and kind of reduced the team size. But the complexity in terms of growing the team is that the more you grow the team, the more you will have to hire people that are not natural entrepreneurs, right? And so finding the people with the right mindset that don't look at this as a 9 to 5, that have this ability to come in and very quickly, independently know what they have to do. I think that's really the key challenge. And it's so hard to know this from someone before they actually join. Because we've hired, and currently we're at our 3rd head of growth. So we had 2 other people. And they've all done their part. And they were all entrepreneurs from an entrepreneurial background. But still, it just didn't work. And I think that is the biggest complexity. Like I would probably say that once you start growing a team beyond founders and maybe the first 3 or 4 hires, like invest in very good HR practices. because unless if you have someone in your team that really knows this, you're at risk of hiring the wrong people, which we've done a couple of times, or at least people that left after a short time just didn't work out. Might not be their fault, might be our fault, might be culture. But yeah, that would be one of the challenges to look at.
Yeah, I agree. I believe recruitment's the most important thing a manager does, because if you get a B or a C or a Z player on the bus or a toxic arsehole, that's not fun at all. It just slows down the growth, such a distraction, So it's so important. What do you love most about growing a small business?
For me, it's really about the impact. And so I came at this from a very long background in sustainability, and my frustration initially with with consulting, which I did before I joined academia, was that I felt like everything I was doing was creating PowerPoints that didn't really turn into anything. Then I went into academia because I wanted to study problems in depth and really develop a deep understanding. But I got frustrated with the fact that academia really doesn't have that much impact outside of occasionally a very influential publication and then education, which is great. So what we're doing now as a business, what I think enjoy most is really seeing the small victories, seeing the kind of little leapfrogs, little jumps, like, oh, now we can do this. Oh, now the technology can do this. Oh, now we got this new client and they're going to create this amazing impact in the world. So yeah, that's the most enjoyable thing, because you really feel that you've got something in the bag and there's a concrete outcome. Like into academia, you spend like 2 or 3 years getting a paper published, and then you celebrate because it's accepted, and then it might be read by 50 or 100 people. And then you're like, oh, that's my success for the next 5 years. So I think you have more impact, and that's what's really key to me.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
So I think the biggest shift that we've had to go through as a team was really, we initially founded the company with 3 founders, 1 CEO, 1 chief strategy. There was me and our chief vision officer, and then 1 chief impact. But we really kind of ran the company as a trio, like the 3 of us were in charge. We kind of took all of the decisions together. Once you start growing to 20 people, it becomes harder to manage this. So really our CEO made the decision to kind of adopt a much more structured, much more conventional decision-making hierarchy. And so with a more powerful CEO, where the other 2 founders were not put on the side, but kind of spend more time focusing on specific things and not really on daily executive management. I think it's been a difficult journey, because again, it's about that letting go of control and trusting that other people are going to do a better job than you. But I think it's been the right decision to kind of change that. So that for me has been the biggest mindset shift.
Yeah, we certainly did that early on in one of my companies. There were 4 of us that founded a company, and none of us were in ultimate charge of the business. It was the 4 of us sharing decisions, etc. And it was confusing for the team. And yeah, we worked it out in the end, but probably took longer than it should have. The number 1 habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I think you need incredible resilience and grit. Unless if you're super lucky and you just find the right thing and you just start soaring from the beginning. I think most companies that eventually succeed spend years just in the trenches, close to failure, every day a little bit closer to the edge. So I think you need that. And you need to also maintain a sense of optimism, because entrepreneurs are fundamentally optimistic. Right? They believe they can change the status quo and change the world. So that's those are the kind of main habits you need. First, for us, optimism is a habit. And the habit I think to avoid is chasing the new shiny thing. Right? I think there's a innate tendency, especially for me, to have this ambition to like, oh, we want to do this and we want to do this, and salespeople overpromise and, oh yeah, sure, we can do this. And then you're realizing like, well, yeah, the product team can do this if you give them $100,000 in 7 months. And you're like, okay, so yeah, focus and grit. I think everyone would say the same things, but yeah, these are the main things.
Are you a small business owner? You know that getting recruitment right can make or break your team's success. Just one mishire can cost your business up to 27 times their salary. Finding and retaining top talent is a challenge, especially in today's competitive market. That's where our Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit comes in. Over 10 intensive days, our online course is designed specifically for small business owners like you. We'll walk you through the process of sourcing and securing A players for your team. Here's what you'll gain. Learn the proven strategies to pinpoint and attract the best talent in your industry. Access our comprehensive playbook filled with templates and tools tailored to fit your business needs, and apply the resources right away to enhance your recruitment process and streamline hiring. Invest in your business's success by helping your management team become effective recruiters. Supercharge your hiring process today with the Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit, available at growasmallbusiness.com. Can you talk how you about people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
So yeah, we kind of covered part of this before, I think, and I don't want to name people that we consider to be things that didn't work out. I think what's maybe interesting is that we've had adopted this mindset that we need to really think about the existing structure of the team every 3 or 6 months and try to figure out okay, if we would start a team today, would these be the people that we really want to hire? And are these people that we actually need? And if not, then got to figure out, okay, can these people evolve and kind of adopt new roles within the organization, or do we just need to make the hard decision? And so, I think the other thing that we did probably poorly is that we overinvested in growth, because every company wants to grow, but we overinvested in growth before really having very proven product market fit in one of our specific verticals. And that's been a mistake that we're unlearning right now, but it's been something that I think many companies might fall into that trap as well. But you believe you have something that people want. You might not really have the evidence yet, but you want to start pushing it. And then you don't really have anything to push yet until you get these first 5, 10, 20 customers that actually pay. Then it's very hard. So, yeah.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I think it's important to maintain within everyone in the company a sense of understanding of what's going on. But once you're a really large company, it's almost impossible to have the marketing people know what product is doing and vice versa. But when you're still small, I'd say below 100, maybe even 200 people, then I think it's important for everyone to have insight in this. So we've developed some of these practices like a weekly all hands, where we get everyone in the team together for half an hour. We talk about where are we in terms of our two main objectives, impact, quantity, and MRR. What are the big things that are in the pipeline? Explain what the big clients are doing, and then give updates on product marketing so that everyone has this kind of holistic perspective. That also enables everyone to become an advocate and potentially a seller of the company. Then the other thing we did was, inspired by lots of learnings around entrepreneurship, really is how do we create a culture in which failure is not punished? So we started doing this. The plan was to do it on a monthly basis. I don't think we really get there, but it's talking about what's been our biggest failure. And it really has to be personal. So our CEO did one, I did one, my other co-founder did one. Our COO will do one in the next couple of months. So I think having this very honest conversation with everyone in the team, like, this is where I messed up, and it's okay. Everyone will mess up. We're not going to kick people out because you're messing up. And then celebrating small victories. So we've got on our Slack channels, we've got a couple of these channels where really good news is being shared. And I think that's also important, right? Especially when you're in financial pinch, you need to keep people motivated and driven. And as a consequence, celebrate every small victory as if it's the biggest one, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm shit out at celebrating because I'm driven. Let's get on to the next thing. Why are we all standing around talking? For fuck's sake, come on. So I've actually got to put things in place so I remember to stop and celebrate, and especially with the team. It's just, something I've never been good at. But I love that idea of my biggest failure. So you're taking turns, one a month, someone gets up and shares a deep story. I think that's really good because that goes to vulnerability, and particularly in leadership, which is very important, and helps build the trust with the team as well. I think that's a great idea.
Thanks.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
My wife would say poorly. So, I mean, for me, the balancing act is really a big challenge because I still have my day job officially at the university. So I teach and I still do a bit of research, not enough, but it's it's been tricky. And I have my other company as well, but I've really stepped down from daily operations there. So I think the main thing to maintain is try to keep healthy and schedule time away from work. And I know that if I don't block my calendar, because my Calendly is online and people just book meetings whenever. So if I don't block my calendar, even for stuff as simple as go for dinner with your wife, spend time with the kids, it just yeah, it gets away from me. So for me, this is really key in managing time, trying to limit work on the weekends as well. I'm very fortunate to live in Singapore, so we have a live-in nanny that takes care of the kids for all the time. But Sunday is holy; that's the day we spend with the kids. So I don't do any work then. So I think these are the things you're trying to do to balance, and then just become better at task setting and task management and taking breaks, also for sports and so. Because otherwise, it can get very messy very quickly.
Yes. Yep. Been there. Got the coffee mug.
Yep.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
I've actually been doing quite poorly, I think, on this. Our CEO has done a lot of this. He's got a few coaches, one kind of soft leadership skills, one more on kind of managing growth organizations. But because I'm, as the chief vision officer, I'm mainly working on large scale disruptive new things, like almost like a moonshot factory, a little bit closer to what we're doing. But I haven't really needed to spend that much time on these things, or maybe I should have done better, because I don't really manage a lot of people actively. And I think that would be my main weakness. But yeah, otherwise it's probably listening to podcasts and a lot of reading, mainly on LinkedIn, like what people are suggesting, and then just discovering new things, trying them out and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
So again, not from me. We've had a couple of people, mainly investors, like some of our angel investors that are also, some of them are on the board, but that are providing us with advice on specific domains. So we've got one of our investors who's an expert in PR, another investor who's an expert in marketing. So another one in fundraising. So these are the people that really help us. We've got like an investor who's a CFO at a big tech company, so they can help us with that. So I think these people that really have skin in the game are really useful as mentors because they really help us. And on the coaching side, I think there's a risk as well. We've seen this in our company that when you start to rely a lot on coaching, or when you spend a lot of time kind of discussing really important things in the business with your coach, it creates this, I would say, this side effect that the other people in your team or your other founders feel like your big decisions are being made between you and the coach, and nobody else is involved. And I had this conversation with a person who specializes in coaching as another podcast. And he was very surprised to hear this. And I think it's an important thing for coaches to realize that, like, there is I think a balance that needs to be struck between how much of the decision making or even the inspiration comes from the coaching, because it results potentially in the rest of the team feeling excluded from major decisions. And then somebody comes up like, "Oh, we had this great idea with the coach, let's do it." It's like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
So, but it's maybe me just being an arrogant asshole and not really believing in coaching.
Just on mentors, you may be interested because I'm not sure if you've listened to any of Alex Hormozi's stuff, but he mentioned on his podcast a few months ago one of his good mates is in academia, and he'd come across this stat that somebody in academia that has a mentor publishes 4 times as much than those that don't have a mentor.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. I mean, I think in academia, your mentor tends to be your supervisor, and so yeah, I've had a great supervisor as a professor, and then you do all the work together, and so the thing there is really that you're working together, and of course the mentor has a lot more experience in the beginning of publishing, so it does make a massive difference. So yeah, I can see that, and it's good to point it out because I recognize that stat, and so maybe I should invest a bit more in coaching myself.
Now, you mentioned you've got a board of directors. How often do they meet? How's it made up, the structure, and do you have a chair?
So we don't have actually an official chair. So we have 5 people on the board who have voting rights. So our largest investor has a representative, then our SPV, so Friends of Handprint, has a representative with voting rights, and then our other investor, Singtel Innovate, has got an observer seat. So in total, there are 6 people on the board because the 3 founders are on the board as well. We are currently actually in discussion with a person who might become our first independent board member. She's a very capable person and might be able to help us a lot with business development. So we're discussing this, but at the moment it's the 3 founders and basically 3 investors, representatives of the investor.
Yeah, that's good. I sit on 4 boards at the moment, chair most of those, and 3 of them I'm an independent on, don't own any shares or work in the business. Yeah, so I've seen both sides of the table. I think it's a good, depending on your size and stage of growth, I think it is good to have someone with fresh eyes and ears around the table.
Yeah. I think it does make sense. I did a course last year from the Financial Times on becoming a certified non-executive director. So, of course, you're getting brainwashed with that idea of the importance of independent members and an independent chair. I think it makes sense. The challenge, I think, is that we spend a lot of our board meetings really on reporting. So we meet quarterly, we do quarterly reporting, and we probably don't have enough time with the board to really get into strategic future planning, which I think should be much more the role of the board. But that's proven to be quite hard. So either we have to increase the pace and increase the frequency of meetings officially, or what we're doing already is just having more one-on-one meetings with different board members and other people in the companies to get more of their advice. But the board meetings, also our board is scattered all over the world. It's like, do we, because these reporting meetings, at least from my perspective, as a founder, it really doesn't help much. You're spending a lot of time preparing all of these documents, and you're basically just spending an hour or 2 hours saying like, this is what we've done, this is what we've done. And then you don't get a lot in return. So there might be much better ways of organizing the board, and we'll have to figure that out. But it's more, yeah, it's a real time sink at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like they're not that effective. It may pay to consider getting a chairperson to corral the team. Obviously, you have a very clear directive. We need to be more strategic in these meetings, and it's their responsibility to make sure that happens. I've written 2 LinkedIn articles on putting a board together, whether it's a formal board or advisory board, and particularly on the chair. I'll shoot those through to you.
Thanks.
All right, Simon, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Finding your ICP. And if you find them, figuring out how to reach them at scale. I think these are really difficult, especially if you have a company where the ICP is a specific role or a specific title in a client business. It's probably easy. But what we've seen in our company, like the people that buy from us, they can literally be anywhere in the company. They can be general managers, CMOs, CCOs, people in sustainability, even people in product. And that makes it really hard, because the reason why they buy from us is because they have values that are aligned with us and a belief system that is convinced that we can turn impact into a key strategic asset for the company. But there's not a job title that dictates that. It's very rarely actually, which is unusual, it's very rarely in the sustainability people, which would be the most logical thing because we are doing things that are good for the world, but it's very rarely those that are buying from us.
Nice.
So that makes it really hard. And then the other thing I think is explicating things, right? So when you're doing sales conversations, when you're hanging or talking to clients, and also when you're talking to product and so, like, how do you make sure that all of the information, the most important things, are actually accessible to everyone in the team? So we're using Notion, we're using Google Drive, we're using a variety of tools for this, but having that discipline to not just say, oh yeah, I had a summary of this meeting, it's in my email. Like, that's not accessible information. So making information accessible is, I think, super hard. But it's incredibly important because otherwise you can't learn as a group. You can only learn as an individual, and then you're doing a lot less learning.
And ICP for the audience, is that ideal client persona?
Yeah, ideal customer persona.
Yeah, great.
I think there it's important to always think about, like, when you're doing what we are doing, or when you're doing complex technology sales, right? So you're not selling kind of standardized products that are off the shelf. You're doing something that requires engagement that companies don't buy from more companies. Companies buy from people, and people sell to people. And so you need to figure out what makes that specific person tick. And what is this? Even if this thing could be really good for the business, it doesn't mean the buyer is going to give a shit. Right? It needs to be good for them. And then what we see in our sales cycles, which tends to be very long, is that we need to have at least 3 or 4 totally different sales conversations. Initially with the person that kind of sees the value and then say, okay, this is how it can work. Then with a person at a product side that say, like, this is how it's going to affect your life. It's a very different conversation. Then very often also with finance and or legal, in terms of, like, okay, we have to sell them on the contracting aspect of this. And then potentially at the kind of the CEO, the general manager level, that wants to kind of figure out, like, how does this align with our long-term strategy? And the downside of this is that sometimes you go through phases 1, 2, and 3, and you spend 9 months on that kind of sales cycle, and then you get to the eventual end decision maker, and they just say, no. And then you've invested 9 months. And as a startup, that's lethal, right? Yeah. You just can't do that more than 5 times because then you just run out of resources. So yeah, that's the key challenge for us.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
So I must admit that despite being an academic, I don't read a lot of books. The Challenger Sale would be the one I'd highlight. I think that when you're selling something like what we're doing, which is a new type of product. I mean, impact has been around for a long time, but impact to drive engagement, 100 times more about what you're doing than anyone who's buying. Even people with a lot of expertise in sustainability don't understand what you're doing. And as a consequence, you can't rely just on them telling you this is what we need, because they don't know. So I think this is really the key challenge. And I think the Challenger Sale really focuses on the fact that as a salesperson, as a spokesperson for the company, your main job is not to just listen, which is important, and figure out what they want, but also tell them and educate them on what is actually needed. And yeah, that's been a really helpful tool. We had probably been doing this without reading the book, but then when our head of growth mentioned this, like, oh, okay, I need to read this. And it's like, okay, fine. So we need to do this structured in that way. And then hopefully it's going to work.
The Challenger Sale, I've recently started upping my professional development learnings around more around marketing, but also sales. And I came across April Dunford's books. Have you heard of her? Or so she's got
first. I don't think so.
First book's called Obviously Awesome, which is about positioning, and the second book is called Sales Pitch, which is obviously about sales pitch. I'll send them through to you, but she mentions the Challenger Sale, so I've thrown that on my list. Haven't listened to it yet, but she's also had the author, one of the 2 authors, I think Dixon was the one that was on, of the Challenger Sale on her podcast, which I've just finished listening to, which is excellent. And they've just come out with a more recent book, which I think sounds like you would really enjoy. Again, it's on my list. I haven't listened to it, called The Jolt Effect. And it goes into the consumer psychology around why people, like 40 to 60% of sales are no, just because of apathy and they just want to stick with the status quo. They've got all this during COVID. They had an amazing opportunity during COVID because all the sales teams obviously had to switch to online sales in Zoom. So they got like millions of hours of sales calls, and they've analyzed it all, and they've found all these interesting insights from that work. So the authors of the Challenges Sale put the Jolt Effect out, I think, a year or so ago. I'll send that through to you as well.
Thanks.
But the April Dunford's book, I think, will be good for you because she says she's the world's leading expert in positioning for B2B tech companies. And so her positioning stuff is for B2B, not B2C. And I think, it's really well written and presented. I'll send those through to you.
Please do.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I mainly listen to podcasts to relax. I have a small obsession with American politics and English Premier League football. So that's really where I spend most of my time. And then I listen to kind of more general knowledge podcasts. Like I'm a big fan of Ezra Klein and news-related podcasts. So I occasionally listen to really kind of entrepreneurship podcasts, specifically when an episode gets recommended to me. But when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm either in bed or I'm running or I'm working out. So I don't really want to spend that time kind of activating my brain too much. So, and for me, the learning tools really are, I do reports specifically in the sector, like regeneration, sustainability, standards. Lots of it is happening on LinkedIn. Like I've got now quite a big network. So I probably have hundreds of PDFs that I should be reading that are constantly, being written about this kind of emerging domain. And we are putting out some of these tools as well. So that would be my main tool. I think, LinkedIn and just, like what we're having now, like an advice from someone saying like, oh, you should listen to this or read this, then I'll try and put that on the list and focus on it.
Great. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
You need an internal knowledge management system. I think this is the most important. And we are using Notion as well as Google Drive, which Notion has a little bit of a learning curve, but it's pretty useful. It enables structured databases. It enables kind of note-taking, agenda setting, task setting. So you need something that really manages activities and where you can easily find knowledge and kind of make it accessible to everyone. So for me, that would be the main recommendation, as well as a flexible CRM that you can use for hopefully years to go.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 4.5 years ago?
Don't build anything until you have 5 or 10 LOIs signed. This would be my main advice. And I think had we done this, I don't know what Handprint would look like right now, but I can guarantee it would be a very different company. I think this would be the main thing. And the other kind of piece of advice is, it doesn't matter if you have one person in a company or 50, the moment you start your company, you need to become a voice of whatever it is your business does. And LinkedIn is a great tool for that. Maybe Slack, maybe Substack, maybe Discord, maybe podcasts, whatever, but you need to become a voice of authority, a thought leader in this space. So start doing that from day one.
Yep. I've just thought of another book because you're a SaaS. Have you read Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm?
I have read parts of it, not all of it.
Yeah, it's a great book. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time today, Simon. I really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations to you and the other co-founders and the team. I know it's been a bit of a rocky, the growth up to 44 team members down to 16, but I'm sure with the passion and the drive that the three of you have and the wider team, you'll get there. So thank you very much.
Thanks. I hope we won't betray your confidence. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Troy.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcasts to help with their growth will find us.